They own the radio stations. They own the record labels. They have the investment capital. So it's really difficult to compete in that kind of space. And what I want you to really understand and make sure your kids understand is that a good idea is not enough for you to make it an impactful idea. Good ideas have to be funded. They have to be financed. So it's like think of your financing like a car. I might be the best dressed person in the world, but if I can't get in the car and actually get to the party where people can see how nicely dressed I am, I'm just going to stay home and no one will ever know. Right. So a lot of times when I see black businesses come along, I'll hear people say, I've got this great idea that's going to transform the black community. And I don't disagree with them. But my next question is usually like, okay, what is your advertising budget? How are you going to make sure that this idea really gets out to all the people that are going to be transformed by it? Or are you just hoping that either A, you get extremely lucky, or that white people are going to come along and fund you, in which case you'll probably lose a lot of the ownership of your idea from the very beginning. Okay. Like you guys see this. I mean, the things that I do, I market like crazy. I've been marketing for years. I'm not ashamed to say I market things. I don't sit around and organically hope that one day somebody discovers me. I make sure that these ideas get discovered, and that took a lot of resources, a lot of money. I had to pump a lot of energy into that. Okay, so let me keep going. Let's see here. So hardly any black musical artists receive respect, credit, or copyright compensation for their music, from jazz, blues, Dixieland, gospel, ragtime swing, bebop, boogie woogie, or rhythm and blues. Stripped of their music and revenue in the United States, black musicians increased their efforts to establish new markets in Europe in the late 1950s, just as their black predecessors had done in the 1920s. By the early 1960s, Europeans had been exposed to black music and dance and could imitate blacks. The mid 1960s witnessed an influx of black influenced European musicians and singers such as the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Bee Gees, and Elton John. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio actually honors many of the whites as musicians and performers, as artists who, quote unquote, discovered black music rather than imitators who renamed it. So basically, they did a Christopher Columbus on your art form. That's pretty much what Dr. Anderson is saying here. We're on page 213 of Black Labor, White Wealth. You can get a copy of it at powernomics.com. I want to make sure everybody knows that. Michael Bolton is the current, this was at the time he wrote this book, popular white singer of black music. In responding to a letter from a reader in Parade Magazine, let's see. In responding to a letter from a reader, Parade Magazine expressed its belief in the mainstream popularity of Bolton, saying he is a white whaler who merely redoes old black soul ballads. When a nationally known black television station informed Bolton that blacks felt he was mimicking black singers and exploiting black music, he assured the newscaster that he loved black music and was paying it the highest respect by singing it. Naturally, some black artists such as Fats Domino, Ruth Brown, and Little Richard, regular targets of white musical imitators, did not see such actions as respect and sued white artists who became rich and famous by copying their music. A few have been successful in their lawsuits. Blacks, pay attention now. This is where we get to the business part. This is where they not only stole your music, but they bastardized it to use it as a weapon to stereotype you in terrible ways. And we've covered this so far in the book that this is something they've done for a very long time. It didn't just start with Lil Uzi Vert. That's a rapper, by the way, for those of y'all that don't know who Lil Uzi Vert is. All right. So they said here, he says here, blacks' lack of capital, production technology, marketing networks, and access to copyright and artistic protection not only left them exposed to the exploitation of imitators, but also left them absolutely no control over their cultural product. When major white record labels refused to contract with black performers, a few smaller white companies filled the void and developed R&B record labels and promoted black music to black markets. The return on their investment was high, not only because they created monopolies on black talent, but because they paid black performers a pittance for their valuable product. So pay attention to what Dr. Anderson's saying. This is he's the doctor. This is the prescription. The illness is racial economic inequality. The prescription that he's giving here, he mentions four things here. He says a lack of capital. That means that for your kids to compete, you must give them capital. That's where you go log in the Black Business School. We've got the $5 a day investing plan where you can invest $5 a day for your child when they're little, buy them shares of stock consistently. You saw the stock market took off today like a rocket. Money's always going to be made over there. Get your kids involved early so they have capital. Don't send your children into an economic game without capital. They're going to lose. They're going to get their butts kicked. Next, he mentions production technology. I talked to my son and told him, I said, if you want to be rich, learn entrepreneurship and technology. Technology runs everything. The majority of the wealth and power in the last 20 years has accumulated to people in Silicon Valley. Why? Well, because Silicon Valley understands the technology. They've even taken over the music industry. They made deals with record labels that made the record labels do a double take and say, whoa, how did we make a deal and y'all got all the damn money? Marketing networks. That's where I mentioned earlier the importance of marketing and the importance of networking, right? Understanding networks in general, just how they work and what they look like. And I've told you guys that one of the things, one of the most important things a black child can learn is relationship management, conflict resolution, the ability to seek out, maintain, and repair healthy relationships with people around them, which might involve some therapy because we're so traumatized. So when I see marketing networks, I'm thinking about two things. I'm thinking about marketing as just as a process, getting the word out about the stuff that you're doing. And number two, networking, the ability to connect with other people in a way that's beneficial so that everybody wins. That goes all the way down to who you marry, what you do with your kids, getting together with loved ones in order to start businesses, all this stuff. These things are important. You can't do these things by yourself. And then the last one is access to copyright and artistic protection. So that means understanding the law, right? That's extremely important as well. So all these factors are important for your kids to understand because here's the deal. There's going to be another great black art form that's going to emerge in the near future. You're so brilliant. You just come up with great things every generation. You come up with something every generation that the world has never seen. Everybody thinks you're brilliant, but they hate your guts at the same time. So they're kind of mad because you're the smartest person in the room in certain ways, but at the same time you're the most hated person in the room. Well, you got to know how to build upon that which you create. Okay, and this means that as a society, you have to take note of the fact that part of the reason that you are exploited in a certain way is because they sort of scrape the cream off the top. They take the ones that they take the entertainers that they want. They remember I told you the three ways black men become prominent in America are either being an entertainer, an athlete, or a comedian. So they'll scrape your comedians, they'll scrape your entertainers, they'll scrape up your athletes, and then they'll put that athlete in the NBA or the NFL where they'll have a whole team of lawyers and accountants and managers who are all white and Jewish, and they because they don't need black people anymore. That comedian will be surrounded by a bunch of people who, where literally they'll have a whole team of Jewish writers writing a black show, but you never see a whole team of black writers writing a Jewish show, right? The same thing is true for that entertainer. Same thing. The model's kind of consistent because they don't want your black thinkers. They don't want your black business people. They don't want your black accountants. They don't want your black attorneys. They don't want your black people who can't dribble a basketball, tell a joke, or bust a rap. Those people get left behind, and then it becomes a complete shit show because so the next thing you know, you'll hear about all these black actors and actresses and entertainers that get exploited when they go to Hollywood. Well, that's because they never really liked you very much, and they certainly didn't like the people that you came from, and you allowed them to cherry pick who they wanted. You allowed them to do a Jackie Robinson on the best talent in the community. Jackie Robinson was not an asset to the black community, even though I know white people made a movie celebrating him going to the major leagues. That's propaganda. He wasn't an asset. The Negro Leagues died because Jackie Robinson was one of the most valuable assets, and you allowed them to come into your house and eat and run. You allowed them to come in and sleep with your daughter and not offer their hand in marriage. You allowed them to come in and take what they wanted and leave behind the masses. He was your leverage. He's the leverage. So this is where things like mindset come into play. This is why you must be the primary educator of your child, because education doesn't just give them knowledge and information and all that. It gives them their value system. So if Jackie Robinson had been raised in a family similar to the way Malcolm X was raised, Malcolm X told white people, he said, look, you might like me, you might take me, but you can't just take me and leave my people behind. Muhammad Ali said, yeah, you might love me, you might take good care of me, but you can't just take me and leave my people behind. Muhammad Ali easily could have went to the military and done a bunch of exhibition fights and been treated like a celebrity and left the whole black community behind. But he chose not to do that. Why? Well, because somebody gave him the right value system. And it wasn't a coincidence that he was linked to the Nation of Islam, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and people that told him to have a black first B1 ideology. You understand? So a B1 version of a Jackie Robinson doesn't become some sort of resource that ends up being exploited and extracted from the black community. A B1 version of a Jackie Robinson becomes the hero of the Negro Leagues because he creates 100,000 jobs. He becomes a legend because he becomes a multi-billionaire because he's one of the owners of what eventually becomes a sports league that's worth a couple $100 billion. Do you understand what I'm saying? So this is important. These values, what you know is not nearly as important as who you are and what you believe and where your values are. All right. So you got to raise your kids your way. Make sure that your influence is the dominant influence. Send them to school. That's fine. Let them do all that. But make sure that you help them understand not just what they need to know, but how they must apply what they know. Don't just give them the gun and teach them how to aim and shoot. Tell them what to shoot at. Tell them how the weapon's supposed to be used, because you got a lot of kids that get the big gun. You know, the miseducated Negroes, uneducated Negroes are a big problem, but miseducated Negroes are a bigger problem. I'm talking about people that have all the degrees, all the credentials, the BAs, BSs, and all this other stuff behind their name. And because nobody ever embedded within them the right value system, they use all that power in the wrong way. You know, just today I had the interview with Dr. Keely Henson, who's the CEO of Juno Medical. He went to Columbia University. I think he's a surgeon. I can't remember what he's, something like that. He's smart, and I love this guy because I said, this is cool. You have all this medical knowledge, and somebody planted it inside of you to say, I want to bring all this back home. I want to bring all this medical expertise back to the community. I ain't out here just trying to impress white folks. Sure, I'm sure he works with lots of white folks, and he doesn't seem like a hateful guy on any level, and he shouldn't be. Why do you have to hate somebody else to love yourself? You don't have to do that. So I don't endorse hate on any level. But he also said, look, my people matter. You know, and if you don't love my people, then you don't love me. It's that basic. It's the Muhammad Ali philosophy. It's the Malcolm X philosophy, right? So it's not the Jackie Robinson philosophy. I'm sorry, but it's not. All right, so let me keep going. All right, page 214, Black Labor, White Wealth, Dr. Claud Anderson. You can get a copy at powernomics.com. If you've already bought copies of his books, I hope you just go back. If you get some extra money, I hope you'll go make it rain on his website, buy some more books, just give them away to people to come to your house, stuff like that. I think it's okay to be a little bit crazy and obsessive when it comes to this, because there's a lot of heavy lifting that we have to do to move ourselves forward. Economic control. He says blacks have used music to earn a living in America for many years. Performing was the single most profitable occupation for blacks prior to the Civil War. As far back as 1850, census data indicated that nearly 24% of all free blacks classified themselves as professional musicians. Not too different from today. Today, you go and you ask a bunch of black boys, what do you want to be when you grow up? 40% of them going to say, I want to be a football player or a basketball player. A bunch of them going to say, I want to be a rapper. So this has been the tradition for almost 200 years. Keep going. However, until Berry Gordy demonstrated how to control and commercialize black culture by forming Motown Records in the late 1950s, few blacks have found a way to form a lifeline between music and the wealth-building opportunities it provided. Gordy practically cornered the market on contracting black singing talent. His artists dominated the record industry for decades, repopularizing black music and controlled the black art form. Motown provided vertical opportunities for black singers, promoters, writers, and musicians. So do you see how you use your bright, shiny Negroes, your most popular ones, as leverage to help everybody else, right? They're the main event, but there's 1,000 of us that might be the undercard, right? You get one guy that, LeBron James is out here playing basketball, but he's got about 20 or 30 people that have jobs and opportunities because of what he's doing, right? And he can turn that into 20,000 if he wanted to, right? So let me keep going. Unfortunately, in 1993, it was reported that this unique repository of black history and culture would be purchased by Polygram Music, a Dutch corporation. Though Motown passed from black hands to white hands, it still stands as the prime model for using black culture to build a sense of racial togetherness and pride and economic success. Building black wealth and black art forms. The record industry 30 years ago, and this is a long time ago, sold $7.5 billion annually in compact disc tapes, record albums, and other products and services centered around music, according to Black Enterprise magazine. That figure nearly matches the total gross annual revenue for all black businesses combined for the same time period. So the record industry makes more money than all the black businesses in America put together. Holy shit. Black performers could leverage their status within the industry to create new business opportunities for black investors and aspiring black entrepreneurs. They could use their wealth and popularity as leverage. Like I was saying before, remember I said earlier, use your bright shiny Negroes as leverage. They are the main event. You can bring in the undercard. All right. They could use their wealth and popularity as leverage to foster vertical business opportunities from talent agencies and musical distributorships to nightclubs and record stores. The more economic involvement in the industry, the more personal power and wealth black entertainers could hold for themselves and their people. So this is why economic education is extremely important too, because what then happens is if you have that guy who does become the great rapper or whatever he becomes, if he's got guys around him and women around him who know business, who understand how to leverage opportunities, who know how to become entrepreneurs and aren't just looking to beg him for money or just get a job, then that is where empires come from, right? That's what happens. You have the person who says, "Oh, well, I can leverage this. I can go get people to come to the event." And the other person says, "Oh, well, great. Then I'll set up the LLC and we'll set up the whole marketing plan and the whole distribution setup." Right? So let's see here. It's developing sports into an area of economic strength. Sports historically has been used to provide forms of recreation in relatively harmless ways to let off steam, gain attention, and foster specific attitudes and behavior patterns among blacks. From slavery to the present day, these purposes have remained unchanged. Sports were not perceived as avenues for the black community to acquire wealth and income. In terms of an example of vertical business opportunities for the black race, sports are second only to black music, but only if blacks perceive the industry with new eyes and seize the opportunity to gain more control of it. Unlike black music, dance, and language art forms, American sports are culturally unique and not produced by blacks. Blacks were introduced to sports in America to benefit whites. Blacks did not invent boxing, basketball, baseball, or football, but they have dominated in these particular sports. Blacks are attracted to sports for a great variety of reasons. This is where Dr. Anderson shows his brilliance again. He's going to explain exactly why you are who you are. First, sports, unlike music, represent opportunities for black athletes to regain the humanity that slavery and Jim Crow stripped away. For many black Americans, sports fill an emotional need and presents an opportunity to measure oneself against opponents, especially non-black ones. For a long time, sports were the only area in which a black person was allowed to be a winner. During slavery, some competitive activities were regularly planned and others were spontaneous. Boxing, wrestling, horse racing, foot racing, wood cutting, and a variety of dance contests were very popular. Black slaves often created their own contests and betting on who could pick the most cotton or do the most work in a certain period of time. Sports produced benefits to slave masters. Saturday night sports contests between black slaves from different plantations were held routinely for fun and profit, kind of like the Denver Broncos against the Dallas Cowboys. But y'all didn't hear me say that. They provided the slaves the opportunity to demonstrate his physical prowess and permitted the white slaveholders to enjoy themselves and make more money like Jerry Jones. At the more popular events, whites placed large wagers on the slaves of their choice and earned money from the contest. The activities were designed to promote blacks as uniquely endowed with physical attributes best managed by white overseers. Permitting blacks to engage in sports activities was also a major part of the conditioning process. For not only did the black sports contests entertain and make money for whites, but free play activities effectively drained off the slaves' excess physical energies, thereby reducing the level of potential threat to the slave owners and overseers. So when you are distracted by your sports or maybe by your music or by your dance, then you are not a threat, right? So there you go. That this is historic. This is still true today, but it's historic. Similarly, the sports events kept blacks preoccupied, again, distracted, until they resumed work in the fields and the factories. So you get into your sports, you get into your music, your entertainment, you're exerting energy, and you are distracted, so that come Monday morning, you show up at the factory, you've had a chance to burn off some steam, you're not causing trouble, you're fitting right into the system. So to this day, that's what I see. I see us on the weekends, we party, we have, we maybe watch our sporting events or whatever. And then Monday morning we show up for whatever corporation we're supposed to work for. And then also this idea of distraction is interesting, because I remember hearing a university administrator who was having a problem with the fact that the black students were protesting and asking the university to do more for the black students on campus. And you know what they did? They said, well, let's bring a rapper to campus, and then they'll get excited about this rapper coming to campus, and they're going to stop protesting. Right? So this, again, these plantation tactics still exist to this day. Nothing has really changed. The only way you can kind of get around it is by understanding the history of it and why it's done in this particular way. So, all right. So slaveholders sometimes purposely over-involved slaves in sports activities so that they were happy to give up their temporary freedom and anxious to return to routine chores. Cruel and abusive whites created sports that used blacks like footballs or ducks. To entertain themselves and make money, whites developed a game called coon hunting. The game was also used to reinforce fear and discipline within blacks. Blacks can avoid being used in the games by making sure that they always obeyed whites. In the coon game, blacks' extraordinary running abilities and endurance were pitted against white hunters' skills. Whites joined the game with rifles and hunting dogs. A slave with whom a white owner was dissatisfied was covered with a scent and set to run free in the woods at night. The slaveholders released their hound dogs to track and tree the slave. Bets would be placed as to whose dog would catch the slave first. Once caught and treed, the slave was usually shot from the tree like a raccoon. During the first few decades of the 20th century in Rosewood, Florida, a wild game of coon hunting lasted as long as 8 days, with more than 100 blacks being killed. Nearly a century later, the caucus of black legislators in Florida successfully pushed through, for the first time ever, a monetary reparations bill for survivors of the hunt. For blacks, there was a direct path from the cotton fields to the athletic fields. While a black person was despised for his color, most were respected for their endurance, strength, and athletic abilities. Blacks began to gain recognition in certain sports. One of the first was horse racing. As early as 1783, Count Francesco Dal Verme, in a letter to his father, remarked that in North Carolina, young teenage blacks were jockeys and rode horses bareback. Blacks groomed and cared for most of the plantation stables and developed a great deal of expertise in raising, training, and racing horses. By the latter part of the 19th century, black jockeys dominated the horse racing industry. Jockeys such as Isaac Murphy had achieved preeminence in national races. He won the Kentucky Derby in 1884, 1890, and 1891. Murphy also won the American Derby in 1884, 1885, 1886, and 1888. A lesser-known black jockey, Jimmy Lee, won all 6 of the races at Louisville in 1907. Within a couple years, black jockey salaries had reached as high as $10,000 to $20,000 a year. That was a lot of money back then. Noting that it was not appropriate for blacks to earn such levels of wealth, the racing industry, held accountable by the larger white community, eventually removed all blacks and replaced them with white and Hispanic jockeys. The only public reminder that blacks developed and once dominated the horse racing industry are the statues of black lawn jockeys that years ago decorated lawns and guarded driveways across America. I'm going to stop right there, because I don't know about y'all, but I'm kind of pissed off about what they did to the jockeys. So I'm shutting down for this week, because the truth can be exhausting. It's exhausting. I'm losing my voice. I'm losing my temper. And I don't know how anybody can hear all this stuff and not be mad. I just don't. If you're not mad, I don't understand you. We're not the same kind of people. So I've shared this information. We're gonna meet again next week. We meet here every Wednesday night at 8:30 Eastern time, and I definitely look forward to seeing you guys next week. Ain't too much else to say, man. I just read that. I'm just living over that. I mean, I knew about the jockeys, but I think reading about it specifically, it reiterates how much was taken from you. how much legacy would have been left, how much wealth would have been left. If they, so effectively, you had ancestors that were just as ambitious as you, just as hardworking as you. They wanted the same things you wanted, but all of that was taken away. And I personally think that it's important for us to understand that and acknowledge that. And so after we finish reading Black Labor, White Wealth, we're going to jump into Powernomics. We're going to read Powernomics, and then I want to read the Black History Reader. We're going to go all through every single Dr. Claud Anderson book first. Then we're going to move into some other books by some other authors that are good as well. But I felt like those are the books we have to start with. So I hope that you'll reach out to loved ones and invite them into the book club. They can go to boycewatkins.com and sign up if that's of interest to them. And so that's pretty much it. So I'm going to get on out of here, guys. By the way, if you want to join me at the Black Wall Street mini conference on March 22nd, you can get a 48% discount until midnight tonight. It's virtual, so you can watch from anywhere in your house. There's a money back guarantee, so I know you're going to be happy. You're going to love it. You're going to walk away transformed with the tools and tips and the steps I'm going to break down for you. So if you're interested, just go to boycewatkins.com and take a look at the link. It's all right there. All right, guys. So please have a good night. God bless you. And sorry to bring the mood down, but I'm just reading that and I'm just boiling. I'm like, okay, I need to watch my blood pressure right now because I'm just this stuff. And the crazy part, I think the thing that probably makes me even madder about it is that they don't teach you any of this in school. About 90% of our people don't know any of the stuff that we just read. 95% probably, right? And that's intentional. That's very deliberate. All right, guys. So I will see you all later. I hope you have a good night, and I love you very much. And I will see you soon. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.